arms, bring them home.
Bring them home, bring them home, bring our brothers, our sisters home.
Welcome to Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaif. I'm your host today. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization. We've been advocating for peace and justice for the past decade. Joining me today are Joe Lombardo and Elliott Adams. Joe Lombardo is a founding member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace and also co-coordinator of a national peace organization, UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition. Elliott Adams is a veteran. He's a former paratrooper. He served in Japan, Vietnam, Korea, and Alaska.
Yeah.
More recently, Elliott's become a peace activist. He's past president of another national peace organization, Veterans for Peace. So our topic today is drones. Before we start talking about drones, I'd like to just briefly ask Elliott if he could tell us a little bit about how he went from being a paratrooper to a peace activist. Elliott, could you tell us a little bit?
Well, Trudy, I guess it's part of that desire to try to help people. So when I was a kid, I thought that going to war was part of my commitment to other people and people for me. At that time, I thought had protected our freedoms. Now I understood that it didn't, but so there was that commitment. So after I came out of war, it was very clear that war was not a way to achieving peace. There was no way that process could bring about peace, but I was unclear how I stood relative to war in general at that point. But then I went on to becoming a politician, again trying to serve society, trying to be useful, and during that process, so first I figured out that the war was not the way to do it. Then I figured out that politics was not the way to do it. And I did enjoy, as a politician, making government work for people. But I realized that that's not the way we really create a better world. That has got to become through democracy. And democracy is people, ordinary people, taking action, making sure their government is responsible to them and their needs, and not just asking them, but making sure it happens. So I recognized that was the only way we were going to create change. That's the only way we were going to get peace. That's the only way we can get democracy, is by ordinary people taking an active role, a really active role in making the decisions that need to be done and making sure that their government does that. And I say that having spent 20 years as a politician, and frequently, almost invariably, my constituents, the people I was working for, were not making me do what I needed to do. They were willing to cotton up to me and let me do what I thought it was done, what I thought was right. And as I've said to many people, you know, if you tell that person over there, whoever it may be, to make decisions for you, what makes you think they're going to make decisions for you? Because they're not.
Good point. Good point.
And it requires that work to recognize where our country is going and recognize where we want our country to go, and then making it go there.
Thank you. Good answer. All right, let's move on to the discussion of drones. First of all, we may have viewers that don't really know anything about drones, so I wonder if we could just start out telling them a little bit about what drones are, what they've been used for, and why. I'd like to ask both of you that question. Why are we so opposed to the use of predator drones? Elliott, could you tell us a little bit about drones?
So to start with, drones is a big term for weapons, well, actually for vehicles. Some are aircraft, some are on land, some are on the water. The ones we're most often referred to as drones are the ones that fly in the air. They got their name because you can hear them droning. They have a drone sound to them, and they fly over an area. Sometimes they were used for reconnaissance. Now they've been weaponized. The Reaper drones we're dealing with in Syracuse, Hancock area are weaponized with 114 Hellfire missiles. but basically they are an unmanned aerial vehicle.
Yeah, the way they're flown is very similar to a video game. There are people who sit behind a terminal at the Hancock base, which is right outside of Syracuse, and other bases in the United States and around the world, and they can watch with very acute cameras. They could watch what's going on the ground. They could decide at what point they want to let go their weapons and hit the people down there, and it's all done from behind a video terminal. And you think about this: here are people who are sitting behind a video terminal and actually killing people in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan and Yemen and other places. And then they go home and have dinner, take their kids to a baseball game or whatever they do, and it must make people fairly schizophrenic. And they are finding, actually, that a lot of the drone pilots are suffering from PTSD, similar to soldiers that fight in the field in war. Because I don't believe that humans are really made to kill people like that, and I think it affects us. And the contrast between what they're doing with their own children and their own communities and the communities that are being destroyed by these drones that they are flying must make this very difficult for them, to say nothing about the people that are being hit by these drones.
Mm-hmm.
So you were asking about also not only what a drone is, but why we're opposed to them?
Yes.
And I would say there's a whole series of issues involved. One is sort of the moral issue, whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever. The idea of killing civilians is wrong. These are a weapon which their mode of killing is not with a bullet, it's with explosion, a fairly large explosion, so that they are indiscriminate. You can't just blow up one person, you usually blow up a whole bunch of people. So there's that sort of moral issue. There's also a very American issue, Judy. We have principles we believe. As I was a young man, for example, and most Americans had principles we believe in what America stands for, what the American flag stands for. And it's a certain level of decency. It's not about killing kids. It's not about killing women. It's not about killing innocent people. And that's what this weapon is used for. So every weapon system has things it's good for. You can have an aircraft carrier which can put a air base way out near some other country. You have nuclear submarines which can hide ballistic missiles underwater. Well, what are drones? And they're effective for that. But what are drones effective for? Well, they're effective at assassinations, which are illegal by U.S. law. Mm-hmm. And they're illegal by U.S. law because we consider it immoral to just kill somebody because you don't like them. And they are effective for working well behind any visual battlefield, where you can really tell people. In theory, in battlefield, you can tell who is a soldier and who is not. In way behind, you can't. So the result is that the people you think are combatants, they may not be, because we don't really know who they are in civilian areas, so you kill a lot of civilians. So I think it's antithetic to the American principles. Then you can deal with international law. And international law is a very, very important law, and it is part of our law. And it is a collective of society's belief of what is just beyond the pale. And it is things like prosecuting a war against civilians, holding a society as responsible for the actions of a few, indiscriminate killing, disproportional use, those various things. And the drones are acutely effective at doing those things which are violations of international law. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole series of ways we can look at it, and then I'll even go one step further and talk about militarily. I don't like it, even thinking as a soldier, because they're ineffective as a weapon. So in asymmetrical warfare, or fourth generation warfare, or guerrilla warfare, which are all pretty much the same terms, ultimately they're always about winning hearts and minds. That's the only way you win any of those wars, by winning hearts and minds. And drones lose hearts, lose minds, and lose wars. And we are going to find in time that they are a terribly ineffective weapon, that they're a weapon to kill American soldiers. And that's a confusing thing. It's a weapon which puts American soldiers at risk because it makes more people mad and enemies faster than it can kill them. And we can talk more about that later, because it's a little of a complicated process. But so there's a whole series of levels at which this is a weapon which should be opposed, which we should be opposed to.
Okay.
And there's a whole other question, which is the use of resources. Is this where we want to put American resources?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things is, besides the weaponized drones are being used for surveillance, and it is creating a situation where in this country there is very little privacy. There are even police agencies, local police agencies, that now have drones in several places around the country, and more of them want to get these drones. We're using them on the borders, these drones, and they're separate from the whole flight schemes that airplanes and so forth do. So for instance, we just recently had a situation where a pilot trying to land at an airport in New York City saw a drone go across his flight path, had reported it. After it was reported on all the news media, it kind of went away. You didn't hear much more about it, because the U.S. doesn't want to talk about the dangers that these things, and they crash a lot. A automatically flown drone does not have the abilities that someone with a pilot inside to maneuver, and so they crash, and they've caused problems. It's also a simple technology, so everybody else will be getting it, and everybody else already is. So they're making them in Iran now. Iran was able to bring down one of our drones recently that was spying on the Iranian people by hacking into the system, and they were able to bring it down. Once they brought it down, the U.S. demanded they return it, and they said no. So they can get that technology fairly easily. And the other discussion is this whole targeted assassinations, and the Brennan nomination. This is coming up a real lot. We just had a big filibuster on the part of Rand Paul, actually. It was not someone I typically agree with, but I was really happy to see him do this. For 12 hours, he stood up on the floor of the House and filibustered against this, demanded to know where in law we can do this, because they have asserted the right to kill Americans, even on American soil, without trial, without even charges being lodged against these people, just by having a high government official saying we need to kill this people. And drones have been used to kill 3 Americans so far, not on American soil. But once they have that law and that ability, it can be used against us. So these are terrible weapons that not only are killing large amounts of people. Again, when I was in Pakistan, I talked to some of the victims of these drones, and what it has done to their communities is just incredible. But it also is a violation of all of our civil liberties, and it is taking needed resources away from our schools and from our healthcare system and so forth to make these very high-tech and very expensive weapon systems.
Yes.
And you were talking, Joe, about them being used for surveillance, and one of the things we have in Afghanistan and in Pakistan is we have software which identifies targets and identifies people carrying weapons. And there's no reason why, if you're flying a drone around the United States, you can't look for people who have weapons. The software can do that. It's that kind of invasion, and mixing it with computer software which searches the images for particular patterns or particular things, like who's carrying a weapon and who isn't.
I've been a software engineer all my life, and I'll tell you, I've never seen a piece of software without bugs. And I wouldn't want that thing to have a bug when it's trying to get my neighbor, because it could get me.
Yeah.
And indeed, they have the Navy's flown drones off of an aircraft carrier, flown its mission, and returned to the aircraft without even a pilot, without anybody watching it, totally by software. And that's and tied with your point, which is very legitimate, which is that never saw software without a bug. Like, it's even more scary.
It is. It's scary. I wanted to get back to the use of the weaponized drones in places like Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia. I've read that about 4,000 people have been killed in drone strikes. And I've also read that at least 200, maybe as many as 900 people have been civilians that were killed. Joe Lombardo traveled to Pakistan in the fall of 2012 and met with some of the families of those victims of these drone strikes. So I wondered if you'd just talk about that just a little bit, Joe.
Well, one of the things to think about is we're not at war with Pakistan, and yet on a daily basis we are killing people in two areas of Pakistan, North and South Waziristan, which is on the Afghanistan border. And, you know, under conventional warfare, if we thought there were militants there or whatever was our reason, we wanted to go in there. First of all, we could capture them. We wouldn't have to kill them, which would always be a better way. But to send troops in there would have started a war with Pakistan. Pakistani people, believe me, they would have risen up against the United States. There was a poll that came out while I was there that showed that 74% of the population of Pakistan see the U.S. as their main enemy. So if we sent troops in there, there would have been another war. So it would be difficult to send troops in there, especially given the economy and given the anti-war sentiment that exists in this country and in that country. But it's easier to send in a drone. You can violate someone's airspace, violate their territorial integrity, and do this in a way without having to mobilize troops, and it makes it kind of less invasive in some sense. So it really spreads war. It's a way of spreading war that we would thought of twice in the past. That's the first thing. The other thing they tell us, I met with number of family members of people who were killed by drone strikes. One man I met with was a Malik. He was a tribal leader in that area. And he lost a son and a brother in a drone strike. And he described how the drones fly overhead all of the time, and people hear the droning. They have a name for it in their native Pashto language. He said there's no real English interpretation for the name. It would be something like chicken screech. But they hear it all the time, and it's caused a lot of fear in these communities. So people don't congregate anymore. People are afraid to have weddings. People are afraid to have funerals, because these have been both targeted in the past. When we've seen people congregated together, we've targeted them. Kids in North and South Waziristan no longer go to school because they're afraid. Their parents are afraid to send a congregation where there's a large congregation of people, so they don't. So it's destroying those communities in that way. And the governing body in this part of the world are known as jirgas. These are tribal leaders that come together. Last March, the U.S. targeted the jirga that took place in North Waziristan, killing more than 40 leaders of their political leaders. So it leaves the country even leaderless and leads to more type of chaos. But plus these are areas, they're tribal areas, and so much is dependent upon tradition there. They had a very open and welcoming way. You know, if a traveler comes by, they open their door, they feed them, they're very open to them, and so forth. But there is now so much mistrust in these areas because the CIA and the ISI, the Pakistani equivalent of the CIA, was paying people to go and say, who are the militants? You know the militants better than us. Go and let us know who the militants are by taking this device, which they call chips, which is really a GPS, place it on their house, and then that can be used for the planes to target these people. Now, these people live in extended families, so their homes have a lot of people in them. So when you target a house, you're killing a lot of people, and you're killing women and children. Most of the attacks happen at night, and I believe, although nobody's told me this, it's because the pilots, for instance, in Hancock Base, work during the day mostly. So it's 13 hours different, so it gets the people there. So when you get people at night, it's people sleeping in their house, children, women, and so forth. We met with a man named Baram Noor. I'm getting it a little mixed up. But he is a journalist from North Waziristan who's taken it upon himself to document these cases. So when there's a drone strike, he goes around, he takes pictures, he gets the names of the people. By their tradition, he's not allowed to take pictures of women or to get their names, but he has documented 670 women, the place and time they were killed, as well as taken pictures of the area, that the house and so forth that was destroyed. He does have names of hundreds of children that were killed in these strikes, and when we were there, we went in a large caravan with the Pakistani people and 31 American peace activists that were with us up to the tribal areas where the tribal leaders were welcoming us for a big anti-war demonstration with the tribal population, the Pakistani population, and the Americans that were there. Unfortunately, we never got to Waziristan because when we got right to the border, the Pakistani military blocked the road with these big containers, and we tried to push through the containers, but we were unable to do it, and there was military on the other side with live ammunition, so we weren't going to push too far. But they prevented that rally from happening because they did not want to see the people in the tribal areas, the Pakistani people and the American people, holding a peace rally, because it would say, well, then why do we have these wars? But he has been documenting these cases, and he's documented several thousand. And there's been some studies that have been done by NYU, by Columbia, and by Stanford recently that have come out that talked about the terror that's happened in these communities because of the drone strikes and how they've been destroying these communities. One other example of what they did was a young man named Tariq Ali, who's from Waziristan, who came to the capital in Islamabad of Pakistan for an anti-drone conference. And he was only 16. He was with his 12-year-old cousin. And they gave him a camera so he can go back and take pictures. On his way back, the U.S. targeted him, and he and his 12-year-old cousin were both killed. So these are the examples that we're doing, and this is why 74% of the population hate us, and this builds into more terrorists and more terrorism, and will continue this war indefinitely. And I think it's a terrible way to fight a war, and it's not making any friends with the United States.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Let's turn to Hancock Field. Hancock Field, for people that don't know, is near Syracuse, New York, which isn't that far from here. And there have been many protests at Hancock Field, and I think both Joe and Elliott have been at these protests. Elliott has taken the extra step of putting himself in the position of being arrested at one of the protests. So I'd like to have Elliott talk to us a little bit more about that and about why you felt this was a cause worthy of being arrested for.
So Hancock is shifting from, it used to be a F-16 base, is now a MQR-9 Reaper drone base. So they're now training, maintaining, and flying drones out of Hancock. As I've told you, I believe that they are an illegal weapon. I believe that they are an immoral weapon. I believe that they are a militarily ineffective weapon. The Nuremberg principles and international law in general make us individually responsible. This is what the trials in Nuremberg were about after World War II, was saying that we are individually responsible for what our government does. We are required, if we do not try to stop our government from committing war crimes, we are also guilty and triable. If we do not physically try to block the commission of war crimes, then we are guilty of aiding and abetting. So I feel it's very important that I do what I can, I personally do what I can to stop, to petition my government for redress under the First Amendment, and to under the Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, which makes international law the supreme law of the land enforceable in every state. So I feel that I have a legal responsibility to petition our government to stop flying these weapons and the commission of war crimes, and if possible to stop the actual commission of war crimes. We've had seven times in the last year and a half we have had arrests up there where a number of people, up to 38, have got arrested at a time. I've been arrested a number of times myself. I feel it's important to take the opportunity of a specific place near my home where I can demand that my government quit do things that are illegal.
Have some of the people that have been arrested there gone to jail?
Yes, a number have gone. There've been a number who've gotten about 15 days. Has been about the biggest sentence that we've had so far. The courts have gone back and forth with trying to figure out how to make us go away. But the fact is that there's moral reasons to be there and to be involved in trying to speak up for what is right. As Dr. King said, any man who does not have a cause worth dying for doesn't have a life worth living.
I thought it was interesting. I've got a quote here from Elliott when he was before the judge, the DeWitt town judge, and this is what Elliott told the judge. "I'm proud to accept the consequences of my acts and any jail time. I do not want any suspended sentence. If you give me one, also please let me know how I can violate it before I leave the classroom or the courtroom. I do not have money to pay a court. I spend what little money this old man has trying to bring about justice. My community service has been doing the duty that the court shrinks from, calling attention to war crimes and trying to stop war crimes. Standing in this court, a community service, is the little I can do for society." Would you change any of that?
No, I didn't. And when they finished giving me a sentence, he gave me a suspended sentence. I said to him, "You didn't tell me how to violate before I leave the courtroom," and he said, "That's not my job. I can't tell you that." So he refused to even do that for me. But of course, in a way, I felt it was very disrespectful of him because I had made a very clear statement. And he was welcome to put me in jail. He was welcome to do a number of things to me, but I felt it was very disrespectful to not even be willing to tell me how I could violate that and go to jail then, as opposed to having a hit hang over me. And I didn't hang. I mean, I ignored it anyway. But anyway, so we are continuing on this path. And incidentally, the 26th, 27th, 28th, we will have a conference
of April.
Joe's involved in it. I'm involved in it. In Syracuse, a conference talking about drones and some actions trying to again draw attention to the drones at Hancock.
And the actions will be of two kinds. There'll probably be some kind of resistance, but there'll also be a peaceful legal protest that will go on. So if you don't have to put yourself on the line to be part of the protests. And I think it's important to have both. I think there are some people who are just learning and are going to come out at whatever level that they are able to, based upon their own work and family situations and their own conscience. And there's other people that are going to throw the wrench in the cogs, and we need both. And so I would encourage people to come, and Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace is organizing a bus for the Sunday rallies at Hancock, and Trudy maybe can tell us more how to get information on the bus.
Well, you can go to our website, which is www.bethlehemforpeace.org, and the information is all included on that website.
Great.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners today about drones?
Well, here's what I would like to say. It's very interesting to look at the polls that come out, because over 70% are against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth that we've had in this country. However, a much smaller percentage are against drones. And the reason for that is because Americans aren't being killed with the drones. There's a lot of people who aren't opposed to the drones, but are opposed to these targeted assassination programs that allow drones to be used to kill people on American soil. But what you have to understand is that Pakistani lives and Afghani lives and Yemeni lives are just as important as American lives. And we will never have a peaceful world until Americans understand that, because it's the kind of chauvinism that says these people are less important than us that allows us to go into these countries. And so we have to understand that. And there's ways of coming together with these people, like the tour that we did in Pakistan, reaching hand across the ocean, helping the communities that need help rather than bombing the communities that need help. And this is the way we're really going to get peace in the long run. And we have to understand that every life in this world is a precious life.
I think we're going to have to end it right there.
Good.
Thank you both, Joe Lombardo and Elliott Adams, for being my guests today, and thank you all for joining us. I hope you'll join us again next time. We'll have shows in the future. We'll be talking about hydrofracking. We'll have a show about how the war economy has affected all of us and our communities. And we'll also be having someone from the Occupy movement come and talk with us about what they've been up to. Thank you.
Bring them home, bring them home, bring our parents, our children home, from the dust of Afghanistan back to our arms, bring them home.
Bring them home, bring them home, bring our sons and our daughters home, from the ghettos of